Hey guys, David here. So to preface this video, I just want to say that I'm not a big reader. If there was like a movie, TV series, or like a video game for a book, 90% of the time I'd probably go for that. But during 2020 lockdown, I had ample amount of time to finally go through some of the backlog that I had on the shelf. So I wanted just to share some thoughts on the books that I read during 2020. I left some timestamps, so feel free to skip around to the books that you're interested in. I finished The Count of Monte Cristo at, I think, the perfect time. It is just pure escapism at the time where I just needed to get lost in some grand narrative. This book was actually given to me almost 5 years ago and I just never could find the time to finish it. It's a bit of a complicated story, but it's actually quite easy to follow. I know this is like a relationship chart that you can sort of help you out, but I didn't find myself using that too often. It's pretty straightforward in terms of the characters, if you're paying attention, of course. Coming into this book, most of us know that it's about a revenge story, but eventually it develops more than just revenge. Does the son of a man who wronged you deserve punishment too? What about using him in your plot for revenge? There's a lot of this kind of moral gray area for the Count to wrestle with. That being the case, there was never a sense of like things being out of his control though. Pacing wise, it's a long book. I find it to be kind of all over the place. Some chapters can be full of like interesting dialogue, a lot of action going on, but some can get really slow. Most notably, I know a lot of people complain about this, was during the Rome chapters. It follows like a time skip and we're a bit sort of disorientated for a few chapters before getting back to the Count. I enjoyed this novel so much that I actually end up doing like a university assignment on this book. Highly recommend it. I'm so happy that I finally got to finish and read through this grand narrative. Highly recommend it if you got a lot of spare time. In 2020, I also finished reading Never Split the Difference. I find it very useful for videographers for me when it comes to sort of dealing with clients, really getting in depth to what they want and making sure that you kind of negotiate in a fair way for both parties. It also helps me when you're discussing ideas with your friend or a colleague. But if you're not kind of in the same career or job, I find this to be still kind of useful in terms of like building rapport, keeping conversation going. I know that this is a YouTube channel called Charisma on Command. They recommend this book a lot, so take that as you will. Each chapter also has a chapter summary at the end. Like, I've read this book already, but I can still kind of jump into it really easily and just kind of get the gist of each chapter. If you're in a similar kind of position, I highly recommend getting this book and having a read. Maybe it'll be helpful for your industry. In 2020, I've also finished reading 12 Rules for Life by Jordan Peterson. It's one of the more difficult books for me to get into. There's a lot of times where I feel like, Peterson's kind of going off the track a little bit, and we just kind of have to patiently wait for him to justify that tangent to get back to the topic of the chapter. Most of the rules he presents are interesting. I'll just briefly talk about one: make friends with people who want the best for you. Some of the advice can be frank or, harsh even. Like, he talks about having good, healthy friends and to not have this kind of savior complex to rescue people who don't want to be helped. But ultimately, the advice he provides is still sound. Like, he writes that if you have a friend whose friendship you wouldn't recommend to your sister or your father or your son, why would you have that friendship for yourself? It does get more philosophical near the end, so it was harder for me to finish the book than the early, easier rules. So that's my thought. I find it to be quite useful, but it's quite long and it drags on a little bit for me. Also in 2020, I finished reading Meditations by Marcus Aurelius. This book is kind of about stoicism and a lot about your mortality. The gist that I got from this book was Marcus Aurelius repeats very often that life is short, and the most you can do is to live in a virtuous way by carrying out every action with virtue, and that's all you can do. This is definitely the type of book where as you get older, you understand more. Currently at my age, I feel like I've only scratched like the surface of what he's talking about. So I think this is the type of book where I'll come back in a few years to get a more comprehensive and full understanding. Man, am I embarrassed to have this book on my bookshelf. What I mean by that is, this kind of like title kind of gives me like a preconception of what the message of the book is gonna be, and having a big curse word on the front kind of gives me an impression that this is gonna be kind of wacky, not that serious. I found this book to be kind of hard to get into initially. I feel like it was a bit edgy at the start, as Mark Manson is trying to convince the readers how little of an F he gives, but actually the book focuses a lot more on self-improvement and growth in terms of one's values and goals. He clarifies later that the book isn't about not giving an F about everything, it's about caring about certain things. And in this case, this book kind of guides the readers on what sort of values or goals that you should be caring about. He writes that if you want to change how you view your problems, you have to change what you value and or how you measure failure and success. So it's about having a perspective change on what you value. Overall, I found this book to be really easy to read. It is targeted at a broad audience, so a lot of the concepts is easy to understand. It's also pretty short, so I was able to breeze through it. It's the type of book where you kind of go, yeah, it makes sense, or yeah, I agree. But overall, like, the message is sound, so I find it to be kind of like the book if you need like a bit of a pick-me-up. I wouldn't recommend this book to everyone, only people who kind of needs a little bit of extra kick, I guess. And in 2020, I read Norwegian Wood by Haruki Murakami. This is another one of my favorite books I read. I find the setting to be so fascinating, and the main character, Toru Watanabe, is just so weird. He's so detached from reality and yet so human at the same time. It's very interesting. This was like a book that I couldn't put down. It does take a few chapters to get fully invested in the setting and the characters, but after that, it just feels like Murakami is kind of guiding you to see the conclusion of the story. Chapter 6, though, by far the longest chapter in the book, about 100 pages. It makes up about a quarter of the book. Is so masterfully done. I think I finished that one chapter in one setting. So I don't want to get too much into the story because of spoilers and stuff, but that chapter was like a bit of a detour, but in the best kind of way. I'm definitely going to check out more books by Murakami in the future. So that's the end of this video. Leave a like if you enjoyed, and let me know if you read these books before and what you think about them. I want to make it clear that I don't usually read this amount of books, so don't expect too many book related content on this channel. This is not a book channel, only once in a while maybe. Alright, follow me on Instagram if you want, and I'll see you next time. Bye guys.